period between May 1918 and October 1919 stands as a dark, indelible stain on the vibrant history of New Orleans. This was the reign of the Axeman, a singular figure of American crime whose modus operandi was as crude as it was terrifying. Entering homes under the cover of night, typically by chiseling a panel from the back door, and then brutally attacking the sleeping occupants with an axe or hatchet found on the premises. The initial victimology, which heavily skewed toward Italian-American grocers and their families, immediately suggested a motive linked to extortion or the mafia. However, the sheer randomness and inconsistent level of violence, with some victims killed outright and others severely injured but left alive, confounded police and quickly established that this was a predator driven by a complex internal compulsion rather than a simple criminal agenda. The meticulous detail of the entry method itself became a signature. The chiseled door panel was almost always removed with quiet precision, often with the panel left carefully near the point of entry. This suggested a killer who was not only strong, but extremely patient and focused, capable of performing demanding manual labor with absolute silence in the dark, leading to early theories that the perpetrator might have been a specialized craftsman, perhaps a carpenter or a construction worker. Furthermore, the selection of the weapon, always an axe found at the scene, demonstrated a peculiar desire for intimacy with the victim's own tools, turning symbols of domesticity and labor into instruments of death, a chilling psychological inversion that made the crimes uniquely personal. The most horrific and telling details often lie in the survivors' accounts. The Axeman did not always succeed in killing his victims, and those who survived provided fragments of information that painted a picture of terror. For instance, the severely injured women often reported seeing a large, shadowy figure, sometimes described as wearing dark clothing, moving quickly through the bedroom. The Axeman frequently targeted married couples, suggesting a resentment or hostility toward domestic happiness, and in one particular case, left a victim alive but so brutally injured that she was unable to speak or provide a definitive identification, a form of torture that extended well beyond the act itself. The city's reaction was one of spiraling paranoia that crossed all class and racial lines. Hardware stores across the city reported a dramatic surge in the sale of axes and hatchets, ironically making the city's defense tools identical to the weapon of its greatest fear. Many families began leaving their lights on all night and sleeping with loaded firearms or protective items near their beds. The police force, unprepared for a methodical serial killer, was overwhelmed by false alarms and frantic calls, leading to widespread public criticism of their inability to secure the homes of the working-class families who were most vulnerable to the nocturnal incursions of the predator. The terror reached its peak with the arrival of the infamous letter on March 13, 1919. Mailed to local newspapers, the letter was an extraordinary theatrical declaration, allegedly from the Axeman himself. Written in florid, self-aggrandizing prose, the author claimed to be a demonic entity from the heathen regions, mocking the earthly police for their impotence. This direct communication transformed the case from a local crime spree into a battle of wits with a self-proclaimed supernatural villain, guaranteeing front-page coverage across the nation and providing the killer with the ultimate platform for his deadly theatrics. The most bizarre element of the letter, and the one most often recounted, was the so-called jazz exemption. The Axeman announced that he would strike again at exactly 12:15 a.m. on the night of March 19th, but offered a reprieve. He would spare any home where a jazz band was playing. He declared his love for hot jazz, a sentiment that was both darkly humorous and deeply chilling. This unique demand immediately led to a surreal citywide response. Dance halls were packed to capacity, and countless citizens installed phonographs or hired musicians to play jazz music relentlessly through the night. Miraculously, the night of March 19th passed without a single attack. cementing the idea that the Axeman was indeed a man of his word, or a man deeply embedded within the cultural landscape he sought to terrorize. Investigators have since deeply debated the true meaning of the jazz exemption. Was it a simple psychological game designed to mock the police? Was it an elaborate alibi for a man involved in the music scene who needed an excuse to be out late that evening? Or perhaps a psychological trigger that temporarily satiated his murderous urges? A less discussed theory suggests the exemption was a cynical way to confirm his power. He wanted to see the entire city dance to his tune, confirming his psychological dominance over a population he viewed as his playthings. The focus on the Italian-American community fueled a contentious sub-theory that the Axeman was actually the result of an internal mafia feud, with the killings intended to intimidate business rivals. However, the randomness of the victims, including young children and elderly women, and the lack of robbery as a motive, quickly undermined this theory. The Axeman's victims were not wealthy or politically powerful. They were the struggling working class, suggesting a personal, almost random hatred, or a target selection based on proximity and vulnerability rather than organized crime objectives. A major suspect who emerged later was Joseph Momfre, an Italian-American man who was shot to death in 1921 by the widow of one of the Axeman's final victims, Mike Pepitone. Pepitone's wife, Esther, claimed she killed Momfre in revenge, asserting he was the Axeman. Momfre, a former member of the New Orleans crime world, fit the general demographic profile and had connections to criminal elements. However, the police were never able to conclusively link Momfre to the other attacks, and the evidence against him was largely circumstantial, leaving his role in the saga deeply ambiguous. Was Esther Pepitone's act a moment of vigilante justice, or a crime committed for personal motives and then conveniently blamed on the notorious anonymous killer? Another compelling, though rarely discussed theory proposed that the Axeman was actually Frank "Doc" Momfre, an individual known to possess a strong psychological instability and a history of violence against women. Momfre, like other suspects, was never definitively charged. The inherent difficulty of the case was the lack of reliable forensic science in 1919. There were no fingerprints, or none preserved, no usable biological evidence, and police relied heavily on witness testimony, which was often clouded by fear and media hysteria. The chaotic nature of the investigation meant that early evidence was almost certainly contaminated or lost forever. The sudden cessation of the attacks after the final murder of Mike Pepitone in October 1919 is as perplexing as the attacks themselves. The Axeman simply stopped. This disappearance suggests several possibilities. The killer may have died, moved far away from New Orleans, or been institutionalized for an unrelated issue, much like the suspects in the Cleveland torso murders. The fact that no similar serial axe attacks occurred in other major American cities following 1919 leans toward the theory that the killer was either removed from society or found a different, non-violent outlet for his dark compulsions.
The investigation's reliance on the cryptic messages left by the killer and the dramatic public response meant the police were often reacting to the killer's narrative rather than leading their own investigation. The legacy of the Axeman is not just the murders, but the template he created for the theatrical, media-conscious serial killer. He utilized the newspapers to manipulate public emotion and fear, turning himself into a boogeyman that sold papers and furthered his psychological goals. A terrifyingly modern criminal figure operating in the early 20th century. The city's response, particularly the jazz exemption, remains one of the most unique episodes in criminal history, a stark example of a community literally dancing for its life. This element of the case ensures its continued fascination, symbolizing the blend of profound despair and vibrant culture that defines New Orleans. The Axeman forced the city to choose between fear and its defining musical heritage, and the city chose music, a strange form of collective defiance against the shadow that hunted them. The enduring mystery of the Axeman of New Orleans lies in the complete and utter lack of definitive physical proof. Every promising lead dissolved into speculation. The true perpetrator was a master of his domain, exploiting the poor record-keeping, the social chaos of the era, and the city's racial and class divisions to shield his identity, ensuring that the dark legend would remain impenetrable for over a century. To this day, the Silent Night Killer, the Axeman of New Orleans, remains a spectral figure, a ghost whose identity is buried beneath the ashes and the jazz rhythms of a bygone era.